So, for the second time in the last 24 hours, my phone has crashed again while attempting to make a video. And I think it's because my memory was getting to the full point. And that hasn't happened to me in so many fucking years that I didn't realize that was probably the problem. We're going to test that theory. Well, I'm pretty sure that's the case because when I went to go check the video clip that recorded before it cut off was not there. So I would imagine I ran out of space and it didn't save. So, try this again. And I was trying to keep it better because I was starting to go off on a tangent, which is what I was trying not to do. But we're going to talk about here the Honda market bubble and why I feel it's 100% going to collapse eventually, and most likely sooner rather than later, especially if the current trend keeps up. So I seen that a friend of mine posted his EG hatch, a Facebook friend of mine posted EG hatch, and he was saying like, I was considering selling it, but looking at the prices, it would be crazy to sell it now. Now he didn't specifically say the reason why, but I'm guessing there's one or two reasons why he thought it was crazy. One, because like if he really likes the car, so if you really like the car and you're considering buying another one later on, you would imagine that it would be hard to, because of what the prices are looking like nowadays. And secondly, because of the thing that the vocal minority like to talk about, these cars are only getting older, bro. Now listen, the argument of the vocal minority, and I know these guys are the vocal minority because every time that these posts go up listed, like, people flame the fuck out of them. And there will always be one or two guys on there that are strongly defending, saying that everybody else are broke and they can't afford the cars or whatnot. And the reason why is because they have a vested interest in it themselves. These are the kinds of people that are also trying to sell at this insanely high price, and they're wanting people to hold the line and keep the market prices high so they could potentially continue to make big money off these cars. But here's the thing, man. What you have is, this is almost like an evil corporation that have come into a scene and found that people like these cars, people love these cars, and they buy them all up in an attempt to try and then control the market to keep the prices high. These are people who don't really care. They're not really enthusiasts. They're just trying to make the most money off they can off their fucking shitbox return. All right? And this is the thing, the fundamental thing that people are not understanding about this whole shit, the people are fucking, going over their head, is a simple thing. The plot twist is being this. Yes, there are people who love Hondas because they just love those particular cars. They like the way they look, et cetera, all that bullshit, the nostalgia things. But the vast majority of enthusiasts in the Honda crowd are young, low-wage people. All right? This whole channel was specifically started up and created for people who don't have a lot of money to spend. This is why I say that I'm okay with you not coming to me to buy an engine, build your own. This is to show you that it doesn't really cost a lot of money to build a decent performance engine if you're willing to do it by yourself. Especially if you're buying everything one part at a time. It's not that crazy. I mean, why the fuck do you think the D-Series engine is such a famous and still long-living, standing platform to go off of? Because you can buy an eBay turbo kit, you can piece one together for $500 or in the $500 range, and then you could buy Chinese H-beams for like $280, and you can buy the cheapest versions of Vitara pistons between $88 to $100. So you could literally have a 500 horsepower setup for less than $1,000. And that was the video I launched this fucking channel on, was talking about how the most budget cost-friendly version of it, the engine you can build is the D-Series, the D16. Especially if you're willing to do the work. If you're willing to do the work, it doesn't cost you very much at all to hit super high horsepower. Everybody loves to nitpick, like, oh, yeah, but the cost of injectors and all that shit. Yes, but those are universal. Those costs you're going to have at the same price tag no matter what engine you're building, right? Unless you're building a V8, and then, of course, you got more cylinders, so you got more parts you need to buy. But as far as building a Honda, engine management, fuel pump, fucking injectors, all those things are going to be common across the across the board. The only thing is going to be different is the core price of the engine that you're choosing to use to build. That's where the price comes into effect, and that's where the D16 is king. You're not going to really find, unless you're building a stock K, and even then, I would still argue that the K-Series is going to be more expensive overall than a fucking single cam. A single cam you can get for literally like $100 if you're patient and you wait. So, again, this is the kind of market. This is the kind of market you're dealing with. A couple years ago, it was a hard thing to sell like freshly rebuilt engines at a decent price, which is why I kind of like semi-retired from the scene for a while, just because it was just like, it was extremely hard to make any kind of money. Yes, there are people out there willing to spend good money on things. This is true. But still, the vast majority of people got into the Honda scene because Hondas are cheap. I don't know how many times I've been told by people that, I'm telling them, hey, $800 for this block. And they're like, $800 is that the whole engine shipped? I'm like, are you fucking insane? A complete long block, freight shipped, $800, 0 miles? Like, are you fucking on crack? But, and they stand by the judgment of the fact of thinking that my prices are overly expensive. So, I just get that this is a lot. It happens quite a bit. Now, here's the thing too. You're like, oh, well, as you get older, you get more money, you're able to spend more money on a Honda or whatnot. Yeah, I get that. There will also be some of those people who are out there like that who will buy for nostalgia's sake. I couldn't get a clean one when I was younger or whatever, so I'm buying one now. And I get that too. All right, respect to those people. You buy what you want to buy. But here's the shit for me, man. And I think this can be said for a lot of Honda enthusiasts. When it comes down to it, you're buying what you can afford to buy. You're playing with what you can afford to play with. As your money increases down the line, are you still looking back at the same fucking kind of car? Mine changed, and it didn't really change so much as the fact that I've always appreciated these certain cars, but I just couldn't afford them, so I never really thought about them. And now I get to the point where I can afford them, and I think about them. I've mentioned several times on this channel me buying a Corvette. And at the end of the day, the reason why I bought a Type R instead of the Corvette is simply because of the fact that I kind of fucked myself earlier in the year by buying the S2000. Me deciding to buy the S2000 put me at too many cars at the place I'm living at. I can't keep the S2000 and still have the Corvette as a daily. I need something to be able to drive around with my family in. I need to be able to pick up my kids from school, drop them off from school, all that stuff. So if I don't have back seats, that's a problem. So I can't have my modified car be a 2-seater and my daily a 2-seater. But if I hadn't bought the S2000, I would have swapped out my SI for a Corvette, and I would have bought something else used with back seats, and I would have literally only needed that to drive 1.5 miles each way, to school in the morning or in school in the afternoon to pick up the kids. So what's going to happen is these prices are going to get locked in at like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 because the prices are going up. People are asking more and more, getting braver and braver with their clean Honda Civic, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to drive up the market price so much and for so long that people are not going to be looking at it anymore, because the root, the core foundation, the baseline of the people that are making the scene up are the young folk. Now, if we price out the young folk from the scene, the vast majority of people that are buying these cars, all you're left with are the handful of people who are willing to spend that kind of money, that can afford to spend that kind of money on these Civics. So what's going to happen is the sales are going to slow down. These people are going to be sitting on their car longer and longer. Now, you see the same people out here that are saying, oh, I don't need to sell my shit, I'll sit on it forever. Those people will get to the point eventually where they realize that nobody's out there to buy your fucking car at that price. So the prices are going to start dropping. So we price out these fucking guys from the bottom. Nobody's going to be buying these cars anymore. And the value's going to start dropping, because you're going to have all these people. The reason why they're listing the price at this high is because there are still some people out there willing to buy it. Once that crowd disappears and dries up, they're not going to have any choice but to lower the price on their fucking car. And it's going to go down. All right. So, and if you're thinking like, oh, all these people that were pricing out of the scene, maybe when they get the money, they'll come back. Nah, it's doubtful. What's going to happen is they're going to remember the Honda being a cheap car, and they're going to remember it as a cheap car, and maybe they'll come back and check when they have a little bit more money in hand, but then they're going to realize that, hey, bro, I could buy this fucking D16 single cam in this old ass Honda Civic, this 30-plus-year-old car for like $5,000, or I can take that same $5,000 and buy like a mid-2000s Lexus, or a mid-2000 BMW, or a mid-2000 fucking anything. There's plenty of sports cars out there they're gonna better bang for your buck. 350Zs. There are plenty of cars out there that you can get, spend the same money on, have it newer and nicer, right? And if you want to talk about, you can take a Honda Civic and swap it and make it faster and all that stuff, Well, yeah, but if the baseline chassis with a stock single cam or even a shell gets to the point where it's so expensive, do you really want to go through that process of spending that kind of money on a car that's going to wind up being $10,000 with the prices of swaps and shit going for nowadays? I don't see it being there. And I think you watch, and we're gonna see this is gonna happen. So at the end of the day, the last PSA is the last shout out is if you have one of these cars in good condition, it doesn't have any sentimental value to you, and you don't need it to go to and from work or whatever, it's just sitting. I would strongly recommend you sell, because I think that we're not going to see the prices get much higher than what we're seeing right now. And maybe you can make the argument occasionally, like a certain trim will sell, like an SI, maybe a GSR that are unmolested and in really good shape. I would argue that Del Sol still probably has a lot of sellability, and the same as the second gen CRX. I think that there are certain cars that are out there that are in the older Honda era that are rare enough where those will still be the exception and they will still fetch a high dollar. But your EG Civics, your EK Civics, they're not going to hold forever. I think that later on down the line, give it a couple more years, you may see one sell every once in a while for a high dollar price. But I think if you're one of these guys with a mildly decent shaped Civic and you're sitting on it hoping the fact that the prices are going to keep going up, I think you're sitting on a pipe dream. Plus, it's just I just don't see any way that this is gonna stay the way it is if the base enthusiasts for the Honda scene are young people who don't have money. So if you scare off the base, you're not gonna have the base to sell to anymore. The prices are gonna fall off. So now, inevitably, you guys are going to come in here. There's going to be a couple of you guys come in here that are going to try and argue about why the fuck that the price of a Honda Civic is still $5,000. But, the Honda was the very first car I was ever in that made me love cars. And I had a real long story years ago about how I came up in the scene, how I fell into the addiction of cars. So that, of course, led heavily onto the reason why I went Honda. But, it was like, hey, the thing that hooked me was I was making like $10 an hour, and when I realized that these cars were in a price range that I could realistically afford, of course, that's what I stuck with. As soon as I started making enough money where I could go elsewhere, obviously, that's no problem for me. Like, both of my, expensive cars right now happen to be Honda, but that's also brand related because I happen to be a Honda engine builder, and what better way to get people's attention by having the rare or expensive Hondas, right? And even then, with my argument with the S2000, like, there are a lot of places across the country that the prices are, the common asking prices are around $18,000 to $20,000. I see them as crazy high as $30,000 for these S2000s. I bought mine for $11,000, and yes, you can find those cars out there in decent shape for that price if you continue to look. So I don't think that it's necessarily the greatest idea in the world to look at some of these cars at these high prices and think, well, that's going to be the common thing, and everybody jumps on that and keeps the prices high. But and if you're thinking, oh, Chris, fuck you, you're just some cheap cunt, or you're broke, I'm definitely not broke. And while I may be cheap, this isn't an argument against the saying of being cheap. Honestly, I have my Integra. The only reason why I haven't sold it is because of the fact that I've held it for so long, and I really want to see it complete before I sell it. But there are none of these older cars. While I look at these older cars, but I look at them as cost effective. If they're not cost effective, I'll move up to the next generation, because base model Civics and EP3 still sell for like $3,000 around here. And if I have to choose between a '92 Civic for 2,000 or 2,500 versus an RSX or an EP3, I'm definitely moving up. So it's just one of those things that be aware of. If you're hoping that you're going to sit on your little Honda for a while and think it's going to get crazy more expensive, I don't think so. I think maybe another year or so, and then before it starts to go. And then also for you guys who love to champion the EV vehicles, like, oh, that's the future, and then it's going to be less than 10 years, it's going to be all over the place. Well, that's just also going to drive down the relevancy of your cars, because as laws continue to change for gasoline vehicles, what are you going to do? You're going to convert your old fucking '92 Honda Civic into an electric vehicle? You got money for that? You don't have money for a fucking built K-Series. You got money to switch to an EV? You know, if that's the case, then, you know, if we're phasing out, if you truly believe that we're phasing out gasoline engine vehicles, then I think that what's eventually going to happen are these cars are going to turn into statues. They're just going to be sitting there, you know, pretty out without ever being driven, because the infrastructure to keep them on the road is just not going to be there much longer. I'm on the personal belief that EV is not going to take over for, you know, maybe another 30 or so years, just because the infrastructure for the charging grid just isn't there. And I'm not even talking about how fast they charge. I'm just talking about the grid in general. Go outside, drive down the street, and see how many gas stations you find versus how many charging stations. Yeah, now imagine that on a cross-country road trip. This is not very viable. Jesus, I tried to hold it in. Couldn't do it. Failed. Also, okay, so the video is already longer than I wanted it to be. That's just my thoughts thrown out there. Just something to consider. I think that if this is definitely a seller's market, I think that eventually things are going to flatten out, level out, and the normal asking prices for the last 15 or so years, normal asking prices were 25 to 3 grand. That's normal to see. I think that eventually that's what's going to fall back down to. You're going to see decently shaped Hondas, you know, selling at $2,500, $3,000. You're not going to see the $5,000, $6,000 cars lasting for too long unless you have like a legit rare gem. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and peace.